Hi everyone, I'm Alex and you are listening to the Health Accomplice podcast. I'm on a health journey and learning so much about my mind, body, and spirituality, and I want to share that with all of you in the hopes that it benefits you as well so that we can live our healthiest and happiest lives. Welcome to the podcast. Hello again. I've been releasing these podcast episodes a bit more frequently, which I'm loving, so I hope you're all enjoying it too. I'm going to try and do it now twice a month and release on Fridays, so stay tuned. I'm really loving all the guests that have been on here so far, and I'm thrilled to share this particular episode with you because for anyone who knows me, you know how much I love Lacy Phillips and the work she's put out there with To Be Magnetic. I've been doing her work since November 2019, so it's been about 8 months, and I've just been devouring her podcast, which is called Expanded, and all of the supported episodes since then too. So you might be wondering, what is To Be Magnetic and who is Lacy Phillips and what is her program all about? So she's a manifestation coach, quote unquote, because I think she's just way more than that. And her program and philosophy is all about getting to know yourself better, your subconscious beliefs, and really working on neuroplasticity, which I'll get into in a second. So basically, she had begun manifesting things in her life at an early age and was learning that the old new age rhetoric, like things that you've heard in The Secret, things like affirmations and visualizations and vision boards that are all really great and useful tools, and we all love to do at the start of every new year, and I do think they're really helpful, but they don't work unless you address the subconscious. They don't work unless your subconscious beliefs are aligned with what you're consciously thinking. So her work is all around diving into your own subconscious beliefs and seeing if they're serving you or not. And if they're not serving you, we change them through these guided meditations, which are kind of like these mini self-hypnosis sessions that are rooted in neuroscience. So this is all based on neuroscience and neuroplasticity. And all neuroplasticity means is that you can change your brain. That means that the anxiety you might be feeling or the emotions you're feeling, what you're thinking, the choices you're making that may not be serving you, all of that can change, and we control that change. We direct the neuroplasticity. We control how our brain changes. So this is all very hopeful because that means we're not stuck in these patterns that we're living in if we don't like them. We can make conscious choices to change our lives and make our brains work for us and actually go in the direction that we want to go in. So for me, like I said, I've been doing this work for about 8 months now, and it's felt really, really good because when you're down there, when you're in these meditations, she calls them deep imaginings. So when you're in these deep imaginings, you uncover some stuff, and it's hard work, but uncovering all of these things has felt so good for me because once you uncover it, once you know what it is that's not serving you, you can let it go, which feels so freeing and so liberating. So, a good example of this, let me give you a tangible example. So, if you're calling in a new job and you have a limiting belief that it's impossible to make a ton of money doing what you're passionate about, let's say you're calling in a new job or a new career, you go in there and you figure out, well, why do you have this belief? Where did this come from? And you rewire it so that your subconscious believes that you are worthy and deserving and very capable of making a significant amount of money doing what you love. And that subconscious belief is now aligned with your consciousness and what you've been telling yourself this entire time. It's not only related to career, obviously. There's a lot you can do this with. And she has workshops on love and partnership, career and money. And one daily reprogramming exercise that I've been using a lot during this time, especially during the pandemic, is one on health and body love, which I think is so helpful because I've had a lot of anxiety around getting sick, getting coronavirus, trusting that my body is healthy, and this daily reprogramming exercise has really helped me so much. So anyway, as you can tell, I can go on forever talking about this. I love this work so much. And honestly, at the end of the day, even if what I'm calling in, manifesting, to use the popular term, doesn't come to me, I would be doing this work 100% day in and day out because it's changed my perspective and given me so much peace. It's been such an incredible 8 months of getting to know myself in a way that I hadn't before. This year, Lacy rolled out a coaching program with 3 coaches to guide people through these workshops. And one of these coaches is Heather Whitaker, who we're speaking with today. So I've personally been working with Heather since April, and I was so excited to see her as one of the coaches because like I said, I devoured Lacy's podcast, and Heather was actually on the podcast talking about her experience, and everything that she had said resonated with me. And so it's been fun working with her. It's kind of a combination of a life coach, therapist, friend, inspirational speaker, and mentor. So, in today's episode, she dives deeper into what it means to have a strong sense of self-worth, the difference between self-worth and deservingness, and some really great tangible examples of how diving into subconscious beliefs and eliminating and rewiring these limiting beliefs has helped her specifically, and what she's been able to manifest and how she helps her clients do this. I've included all the resources in the show notes of this episode and also on healthaccomplice.com, where you can find more info on Heather. So without further delay, because like I said, I can keep talking forever, let's get started. I don't know if I told you this already. I think I mentioned it in one of our sessions, but I actually listened to the expanded podcast episode with you in it in February. And I remember exactly where I was. I was in Arizona, and I was listening to you speak, and it resonated so much with me. Your story, how you shared it, just the way you talked about the work. I was like, oh my God, this girl gets me.
And I love it.
Yeah. And when, Lacy released the fact that there were going to be coaches, which I'm so happy with, because I think the supported episodes are great and the work is self-guided and it's awesome. But there's always, you always want that personal one-to-one and like bounce ideas off of somebody. So when Lacy announced that there's going to be a coaching program, I was like, yes. And then I saw that it was you and I was like, oh my God, I think I manifested this.
I love it. You and me both.
Yeah. And for anyone who wants a deeper dive into your story, I'll suggest that episode and link it in the show notes. But
perfect.
I would love for you to start out with introducing yourself, giving everyone a little bit of background, as well as going into like, what was your aha moment that led you to start the TBM work?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like the majority of my life, so I'm 36 years old, and, it's only been about the last 4 years that I've actually been awake. And I know that sounds very woo-woo, but I was always someone that basically stacked as much as I could fill in one day. It was all about the list. It was all about the go, go, go. And that's really how I kind of equated my self-worth and my success was how much could I do in a day? How many people could I see? How much could I really avoid feeling and thinking anything inside? And, about 4 years ago, I was in a job that I hated, and I was just basically, I've been in corporate wellness for a really long time. And even though I love corporate wellness in general, what I was doing was just, it wasn't aligned with me. I wasn't aligned in general with how I was living my life. I wasn't being authentic. I wasn't checking in with myself. And I'm a big believer in that if you are not in alignment, at some point you will have a rock bottom. You will be knocked on your behind. And that's exactly what happened to me. This could be triggering for someone, so I want to say that, but, I was attacked at my car by gunpoint, and I can say that calmly right now. It's been a lot of work with trauma therapy, but I was able to kind of fight and get away. And the point is that as I was running, I realized that this isn't my story, right? The go, go, go is not my story. That living inauthentically wasn't my story. And so I took that opportunity, that rock bottom, to decide, how do I want to rebuild? And of course I did all of the things that so many of us people who are looking at self-help do, like I went to The Secret, and I went to, Gabby Bernstein's The Universe Has Your Back, and, a couple of like vision boarding. And not that there's anything wrong with that at all. It wasn't getting me to like the root of why I was doing the things that I was doing and some of these looping stories. And so I heard Lacy Phillips on a podcast. I believe it was Almost 30's podcast. And I was just like, oh my gosh, at the time it was called Free and Native, but I was like, this is what I need to do. I need to look at the root of why I'm doing so many things. Why am I numbing? Why am I running away? Why can I not be by myself? And so I dug into the work. And what's really funny is that I didn't want to be by myself 4 years ago. And now space is so huge to me. And I'm literally my favorite person to talk to. Like I talk to
I love that.
myself every day. And so, part of this work, part of doing To Be Magnetic, is understanding who you are at your core and how can you be more authentic. And, so I've been doing this now for 3.5 years. And I took it seriously. And last November, To Be Magnetic was having a manifestation tour. And so I went to it. And Lacy at one point said, has anyone had success? And I happened to raise my hand. She called me up on stage in front of 250 people and asked me to share. And I did. And she asked me to be on their podcast, the Expanded podcast, which, you mentioned that you listen to. And the New York Times interviewed me. And it was just honestly like really, really life changing. And in March, we started to have the conversation about me coaching. And so, here I am now, a few months into coaching, and it's the most purposeful thing I've ever done. I feel really, really, I'm not going to use the word lucky because, I worked hard to get here, but I feel blessed on how this has all kind of happened.
Oh my gosh. I just want to say you are so brave for going through what you went through. That is incredible. And I'm so happy that you're here. And, it's awful that it had to be that moment that led you here. But I'm just so happy that you're here and we're working together and that you're taking that and sharing it with other people, because I think it's so important and it can help all of us. And that it's funny that you mentioned like all the, not being awake. I'm 36 years old as well. And I feel the same way. I feel like I just woke up 3 years ago when I started diving into this work. I feel like I just learned how to be an adult 3 years ago in terms of like knowing what my feelings are, how to handle my emotions, how to decipher my emotions and figure out what I'm feeling. And it's interesting because I started this work in full transparency because I'm calling in love and partnership. And now that I've been doing it, I'm like, okay, even if what I'm manifesting doesn't come to me, I would keep doing this work 100% because it's changed.
Totally.
It's changed every aspect of my life, all of my relationships and how fulfilled I feel and how comfortable I feel in my own skin.
I was just going to say that at the end of the day, I think this work, people are drawn to it to manifest items, and really to what you just said, as well as myself, that whether you get the item or not, or the person or whatever it is, you start to realize that it's not even about that. It's the feeling that you have of getting to know yourself and understanding the energetics and the why behind things is the greatest gift you'll ever have. And, I don't want to act like in the last couple of years, I haven't been able to manifest large things, because I 100% have. But at the end of the day, it's the feeling of deservingness, which I know that we'll get into, is the greatest gift of all, which sounds so cheesy, but until you're doing it and you're like, okay, I totally get this, and I feel like a completely different person while at the same time home.
Yes. And embracing the cheesiness is also part of the work too.
Totally.
Because if it's too cheesy for you, that's a block, right?
Right. Yes.
We just have to embrace it. Can you tell everyone what you were able to manifest?
Yes. So, Lacy always talks about starting small, right? And you start small so that you can really build your trust muscle. So in the beginning, it was, little things like a brown jacket, So basically what happens is that when you're diving into this work, you go through the first workshop, which is how to manifest. So really understanding that you need to have a list. And yes, it can be detailed, but you also always want to add in the energetic. Why do you want these things? And the reason why we look at why do we want something is because it's really good to know, like, is this really like your core essence on something that is aligned with you? Or are you looking for to gain these things for outside validation? Are you looking so that it doesn't make you feel like you've got low self-worth? Like, what are you trying to like prove? And so it's really important to understand that as well when you're making your list. But on my list, it was a brown jacket, the engagement ring, where I got engaged, my exact wedding dress for the price I wanted, down to where we got engaged, where we eloped. I mean, this sounds excessive, I know, but
No, it sounds wonderful.
from the job that I had been manifesting, which I need to say it took me 2 full years to manifest the job for the exact, amount for the salary to my house that we were able to purchase last year. And then even down to, being a to be magnetic coach. And one that's really silly that everyone laughs about, but like I was able to manifest bushier eyebrows. And I know that sounds so silly, but you can put anything on your list. Honestly, you just have to understand why you want it. And then really, being able to see like, what are your limiting beliefs on why you think that you can't have them? And that is the number one thing. Because when we look at what's on my list compared to what's on your list and anyone else's list, the important part to remember is that we can literally have anything that we want. We just have to understand why we feel like we can't. Where did we pick up these certain looping stories? Because that's what this really comes down to. And so this work is about removing all of these different blocks, boulders, whatever you want to call them, that are in your way on your path to getting to where you want to get.
And that's what self-worth is, right? Can you talk a little bit about
Yeah.
what exactly is self-worth and how is it different from what you mentioned earlier, deservingness?
So self-worth, I would say, is kind of like confidence, right? It's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I deserve the guy to call me, or yeah, I deserve the raise, or I deserve to have that dress. It's very conscious based. I don't want to say superficial because that has a negative connotation, but again, surface level of just like confidence, self-worth, you can use those interchangeably. But just because you are saying out loud and you might even think that you deserve something, or that you should have it, it's the subconscious feeling of, yes, I truly deserve this. And when we have unwavering faith about believing and deserving something, that's when the surrender sets in. That's when you no longer have to force or push. The feeling of desperation, all of that is really dissipated because you just know that it's coming. And it doesn't happen overnight, as doing the work, right? I mean, especially like I'll give the example for the job I wanted. I mean, I wanted it so bad. And, I had, of course, different interviews come up and it was like, okay, this is a test. This is making me feel like I'm going to settle, or this is definitely crossing a financial boundary, or this job is going to make me feel guilt or shame in some way, right? But instead of taking it because you feel like nothing else is going to come, it's that feeling of just settling in and knowing like this isn't for me, and if I haven't received it yet, it's because it's coming, or because I have a few more blocks and limiting beliefs to work through to get it. But I trust in the universe, or insert any, word you want to use that you feel connected to, and knowing that it's coming. And that is deservingness. And knowing that there's no forcing, there's no pushing. It's like just that feeling of calm. It will come. I think that I've seen a quote before that it's like, it's not about the destination, but it's about the journey. And really that journey is about surrender.
So there's so many questions I have. I want to unpack
Yes.
all of that because there's so much. So have you worked with a client that when they're sitting there calling in a specific thing, like let's say they're calling in a new job, they want this job, it's their dream job, and then you ask them, why do you want it? And they realize, oh, it's because of ego. I want it because I want to make my parents happy because they'll be proud of me, or because I just want to show people how smart I am. What is that relationship between the first part of asking yourself why, and then how do people navigate that down the road? Do they is that then goes into the work that you would do with TBM, is really figure out why do you want something, and if it's out of ego, is that okay?
Yeah, okay. And I don't want to use ego as a bad word, right? Because ego, if ego is something that is just part of your core essence, meaning like, hey, like words of affirmation is my love language and I like to be told good job, because then that's fine. But it's also knowing that even if someone doesn't tell you good job, you believe it on your own. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's the difference, is that like you don't need someone to tell you to make you believe it, that you believe it first, but you still like to be told. So there is a difference there. So the first thing is that, understanding like what's a looping story. And it takes a little bit to understand that, right? And there's multiple different workshops within To Be Magnetic. There's how to manifest is where you start. There's the inner, unblocked inner child, which is really understanding like what are the different stories that you picked up from your parents or caretakers or siblings or even friends as a young child that left an impression on you that you don't even realize that you're carrying through your life. There's a workshop called Shadow, and that's really around, people have a hard time with the word shadow, but it's kind of like what's bringing you shame, what makes you feel guilt or shame, and understanding that, because when you don't own something, it owns you. And so being able to, really be able to feel comfortable with a feeling that, again, that like kind of brings you some shame.
Mm-hmm.
And there's unblocked money, which is all around career, and then unblocked love. And so the reason I bring these up is because when you'll know based on what you're manifesting on which particular workshop you need to work through. I mean, inner child and shadow is always number one. I say that you need to understand what are these looping stories that aren't yours that you can let go, and then what's some shame that you have that you can realize that you've actually never experienced, or maybe it's been in the past, but moving forward, it no longer has a hold on you. So based on that, when you have your list, is that's when you'll be able to see, if you like, we'll use the work, example that you gave, that if you are looking to call in a job, that is, maybe it's creative based, maybe it's around art, but you have no self-worth, meaning no confidence in it because growing up, your parents pushed academics, right? And so you don't actually believe that you can be successful in a creative or art-based job because of what you heard. And really the truth is that if this is something that you brings you joy and that makes you feel good, it's working through the fear of disappointing your parents, because that comes down to people pleasing and seeing that really their opinion has no hold on you anymore. And doing the work is when you can start to let that go. Does that make sense?
That totally makes sense. And so that's a really great segue into my next question is, can you have self-worth in one area, high self-worth and deservingness in one area, but in another, it's not fully there. So whereas in love, you might have high self-worth and deservingness and have a really fulfilling relationship, but somehow your career is not quite there, or vice versa. How does that all work together? Because I think a lot of people blanket statement, like, I'm a confident person, I have great self-esteem, I have self-worth and deservingness. But when you look at it on a micro level, I think it's a little bit different, right?
Oh, definitely. And 100%. I mean, you have so many different facets in your life. And you can have, just like you said, high self worth in your career and maybe low self worth in your body, right? you can also, it'll shift along the way. It doesn't mean that you'll always have high self-worth and confidence in everything at all times. It's based on what's triggering you. And I can give a personal story that I've always had high self-worth, confidence, it matched with deservingness when it comes to career, because the story that I picked up as a kid was is that all the women in my life were extremely successful. They were able to, make good money and, put food on the table. And it was very much of don't depend on a man, right? And, career comes first. Yet at the same time, the women in my life struggled with weight and body image and constantly talked about it. So, the story that I saw was is that you couldn't be successful in work but also take care of yourself. You couldn't have self-love, you couldn't have body love, like you couldn't have a good body image, because so much time was spent on work and being successful and career and money driven. So I had deservingness in the career aspect because that's what I saw, right? That's what I witnessed. Yet I didn't have self worth in my body because I didn't witness that. I didn't see the women in my life speak well about their bodies or love themselves. And so a lot of my work has had to be around understanding, like, what have I picked up? Whose story is that? If that's my mom's story, do I want to continue working with her story, or can I let it go? And a big part of this work is letting it go. That doesn't mean that you can't be triggered, but the nice thing is that I have all of the tools and resources every time I feel triggered to work through that, and understanding that these limiting beliefs are not mine. They were passed on to me. How can I give it back or just let it go?
Yeah, that's such a good example too. And I feel like, everyone, no matter if you even had the most perfect childhood that you can imagine, there's always going to be a story that you were exposed to and a belief system that may not necessarily align with who you really are or what you really believe. And that's what I discovered in doing some of this TBM work, is trying to decipher what's really mine and what somebody else imprinted on me, which I think has been like such a great journey in self-discovery. I love it.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think the important thing is that once you recognize things, right? Like once you're like, okay, these are some of the blocks that I'm feeling. This is when I'm triggered. This is the root of it. Now, what do I do with it? Right. And it's what do I do with it's the hardest part, is that you can be aware, but if you can't actually then move forward, you're stuck, right? You're kind of like in that rut of, who your authentic self is, but you can't quite get there. Right. And so a big part of this is recognizing that you can either have a conversation, with whomever in your life that you picked up the looping story with, or if that doesn't feel comfortable, it's starting to really like see where is this played out in all of these different areas. I'll give you an example. One I recently found is that I picked up that I have to give more than I can receive. So in a lot, I say multiple women in my life because I've got a mom, I have a stepmom, I had two grandmothers. And so I witnessed this, right? And, even 3.5 years into doing this work as well as coaching, I hadn't picked up on it. And so that's when I can decide, like, okay, I can either keep repeating this pattern or I can change that. And again, going back into the work and recognizing, how does this make me feel? Why do I do it? What happens if I stop doing it? And that's a big thing for a lot of my clients, is the fear. So many people have fears of things they've actually never experienced. It's not actually true to them. But the fear is so strong that they believe it to be so. And so again, it's a big part of understanding of what's the limiting belief? Where did I pick it up from? Whose story is it? Do I want to continue that story? And if I decided to stop it, what's the worst that could happen, right? Or have I actually even experienced this? And if I haven't, then this is a fear that isn't true to me. And so that's a big part of this, is just really breaking it down and making it into a little bit more simple steps of like the trigger, the block, the root, and then like, how do I heal this? And doing so much of this work, being aware is part of the healing process.
Yeah, that awareness is so key. And sometimes, like you said, you didn't even realize that you had this story until later on. I mean, I'm discovering stories every day. I'm like, oh my God, this is like forever work. How do you know if you have enough self-worth in a particular area?
I think it comes down to, again, I know I've said this before, but like on the surrender side of it, that you always hear people saying, like, go with the flow. And I know that that sounds kind of silly to bring that up. But honestly, it's if you feel like you're fighting, if something isn't coming easily or naturally, that's when you can tell that you're trying to control. And anytime you are trying to control, you're not in the surrender. And when you know that you have, true self worth and true deservingness is when that you're not trying to force something.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that like I have noticed with clients is that everyone has a fast track to magnetism. So building your self-worth, building your magnetism, there's a couple of things that you can do, and everybody should be doing all of it, but there are a few, or maybe even one that's like true to you, that's going to make things come faster. Building your magnetism and your self-worth, you want to be able to set boundaries. And setting boundaries is really hard for people, but it's saying no, it's understanding that this doesn't make me feel comfortable. And that can be a physical boundary, that can be an energetic boundary, it could be a financial boundary. Anything that just doesn't sit right or doesn't feel good, whether it's saying no or taking yourself out of a situation or not picking up the phone, whatever it may be, that's really important. Being able to say no, that is really hard for people, myself included. But every time you say no, you're really increasing your magnetism. Because if you were to say yes, that's keeping yourself small because you're doing something because you feel like you have to versus something that you want to do. Again, surrender is a huge one. That is my particular fast track. That when I know that I am controlling, I'm not in surrender. So if I can just release the forcefulness, it always makes me feel more magnetic and makes me feel like I have more self-worth because I'm not trying to force something. And then one that's really hard for people is jumping off cliffs. And that just means doing something that makes you scared. Now, that doesn't mean, staying in an abusive relationship or a manipulative relationship, whether that's friendship or even a work situation, but doing something out of your comfort zone is always going to, I always have clients who things will come fast to them as soon as they step out of their comfort zone. And another one, and this is languaging of Lacey's, but like following pings. We have our mind that tells us to do something, and then we have our gut, or like a ping, like just like that gut feeling of if someone decided to all of a sudden, like, you start a podcast, right? Like, you followed a ping, and like, what is this doing for you? And so those couple items are things that you can be doing to increase your self-worth, to increase your confidence, that will get you to a level of deservingness.
I love the way that you just broke that down because that is
Oh,
so
good.
helpful. That is so incredibly helpful. The boundaries piece is huge. For me personally, it's something again that I just learned how to do very recently is set boundaries. But yeah, the surrender piece, I I think that's where I'm the same as you, where whenever I surrender, I become more magnetic. And I think about the things that I've manifested, like my current job, for example, at Shop Style. I've been there for 7 years. So I was unknowingly manifesting 7 years ago, but I wanted this specific job and I didn't even know what it looked like. I just knew that I wanted to work in fashion, but technology at the same time. And I was like, I don't even know if that exists. And I put it out there and it took a while, just like yours took a few years. I think mine took a year and a half, but I got a ping one day or just like an intuition to take a different route home from work. And I ended up in a totally different neighborhood. I never had gone there, and I bumped into somebody that I had known and just met once before who was a recruiter for this very company. And it was so incredibly like serendipitous and, you know, meant to be. And I just felt like it was magical to me because I was like, that was so, I mean, I don't really believe in coincidence. I think everything happens for a reason. I'm like, wow, that was very cool. But I had not given up. I don't know if I want to use the word given up, but I kind of did. I mean, I was like, that would be cool, but I'm enjoying where I am right now.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing happened with the apartment that I'm living in right now. When I was moving from San Francisco to New York, I had written down a list of everything that I wanted in an apartment. And this one kind of fell into my lap and it was taking forever. And again, it was that same feeling of, I don't know if this is going to work out because it's taking them months. Like maybe I should just start looking somewhere else. I kind of gave up a little bit. But
Mm-hmm.
it's so hard to give up on things you really want, you know, especially when it comes to love and partnership, or if you really want a baby or a family, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of, you know, people who are trying to get pregnant. It's like, how do you not think about it?
Right.
How do you surrender that? Like, do you have any tips on how to be better at surrender?
Well, one thing that I do every day is this is so silly. So I actually created my own voice memo, just like in the voice memo notes in your phone, and reminding myself that when I surrender, that things come to me, and that what surrender feels like is letting go of control. It feels there's a sense of calm, there's a sense of peace. And so I think it's like 45 seconds. And every morning I listen to it because it's a reminder, because I am someone that likes control. And so I have become so self aware that in the moment of me noticing control, I can stop myself and be like, oh my God, I'm controlling. I'm not surrendering. Like I'm forcing. Like, can I just like stop in that moment? So part of this is practice. Also, it's giving yourself grace that, you know, and I don't know if I said this in the beginning, but we're constantly tested. And when something is, and I think I did actually now that I'm saying this out loud, but you know, when we're tested, you know, our boundaries are being tested and we're being tested on settling or feeling guilt or shame. And so you can't fail a test. They just keep getting bigger and bigger until you are just kind of knocked down. And so when I start to notice that I am not surrendering and I'm, you know, really forcing control, I'll just stop, but give myself grace. I do not beat myself up anymore because it's not worth it. If everything is energy, that's also energy that I'm putting back into myself. And I don't mean that like in a only think positive and don't think bad. That's not what I mean. But it's just not, anytime that I'm trying to force, I know that that's blocking something coming in. And because I've been able to see to believe, right? I've been able to receive things that I've wanted. And I know that a big part of that is the surrender, that I can just really let go, and knowing that like if it's meant to be, it'll be, which again, it's so much easier for me to say that than to truly feel it. But after 3.5 years, I 100% believe that if I am meant to have something on my list that I'm calling in, I will receive it. And if I don't, which so far that's not happened yet, it's because it wasn't meant for me, you know? And sometimes I'll sit back and look to think like, okay, it's taking a while, right? Like the job, it's taking a while. So where am I trying to force? Or is this really true to me? You know, is there anything in here that is not aligned with me? And one of my favorite mini workshops within To Be Magnetic is the Authentic Code Workshop. And that's really understanding who your authentic self is, meaning maybe that's not who you are in this very moment, but it's who you want to become. And then also, what are your top 4 core essence needs? Like, what do you need in your life to feel good? And based on those needs, you can always cross check that with the people in your life, the job, everything on your manifestation list. And I think that that's where surrender comes in, right? Is it looking like, okay, this is what's on my list. This is who I'm searching to become, and these are what I need. And so it's like you have your own blueprint. So you can always check back in. And if you're forcing, you can look to see, like, I'm trying to control. This is coming from my ego. This is coming from low self-worth, or this is coming from a lack mentality.
I love that you do the voice notes. I think
Oh my
that's
God.
so amazing. It's not silly at all. That is so cool. I'm going to start doing that. I love the authentic code, by the way. It's been so helpful for me because I have my authentic code like in my notebook that I write in every
Mhm.
day. It's like on the back page. So anytime I'm questioning something, if there's something that comes up like a new opportunity or I'm wanting to engage in an activity of some sort and I go back to and I'm confused about it. Like, do I want to go work from Denver for a few weeks? I don't know. Does it align with my authentic code? I'll take a look at that and see. And it's been so helpful. So I think it's
Yeah,
a really good place to start.
yeah, and the reason why it's helpful again is because then if something's not coming in, you can look to see, like, oh, well, it's not coming in because this isn't what my core essence is looking for. This is like an outside factor that's coming.
Yep. Can we go back to talking about the limiting beliefs, and everything that we've just discussed is really about diving deeper into those limiting beliefs, because you're calling something in. Again, that whole, affirmations, vision boarding is great, but it doesn't work unless you truly have this underlying self-worth, deservingness, and have unblocked these limiting beliefs. And there's science to it in that you can change the way that you can essentially change your personality in a lot of ways, which I know is like an extreme statement. Can you talk a little bit about like the neuroplasticity and how you can change your beliefs, and what happens when you go into the to be magnetic work? Because for anybody that hasn't done this yet, when you're on to be magnetic, you go into the work that Heather was just talking about, and it's these, for lack of a better word, I can't think of module, like an inner child.
Yeah, that works.
Yeah. And you go in there and they're meditations, and they're kind of like a self hypnosis that gets you deep down into your subconscious, so you can uncover the beliefs, and you can uncover some things that may not be so obvious to you in your conscious mind. So can you talk a little bit about like what happens down there, what that looks like, and just how it's, how you guys are working with Dr. Tara, and how it is, there's a scientific explanation and approach to all of this too.
Yeah, definitely. So, Lacey created this work a few years back, from her own experience and understanding that this really isn't just about manifestation, which we talked about, right? It's really about changing those limiting beliefs, which just in case anyone is kind of like, what is that? But it's basically the feeling, the true feeling of I can't have this, I don't deserve this, this will never happen to me. And doing these workshops, it's changing that. And then she's involved Dr. Tara Stewart to come in to almost validate the work that Lacey's already been doing, to change it from a neuroscience perspective, to really, understand that there are breakthroughs that we're doing actively to alter and change the way that our brains work. Because the thing is that so many people are like, well, I'll never be able to, I'm going to do a blanket statement, I'll never be able to earn X amount of money because, I'm not smart enough, or I can't do it. And, no one in my family's earned this amount of money, so I'm not going to do it either. And I don't know anybody that has. So again, it's just that limiting belief that you have essentially a cap on your salary. And so by doing this work, you're going in and you're altering your beliefs. You're seeing that those beliefs do not belong to you, and literally changing your brain. We can transform the way that we believe about what is possible by doing this work. That it's not just the vision board, and that because I have a photo of a house on my vision board, that this house is going to come out of nowhere. It's looking that I didn't believe that I could actually afford to buy this house. So once I did this work, I could see that lack mentality belonged to my mother and not me. And when I removed that lack mentality and could see that my friends in my circle who made roughly the same amount of money as me were able to buy homes, I was expanded to see that that was possible. So I changed my brain in the thinking that I could not ever have or own a home. I was able to see that that feeling wasn't mine. It didn't belong to me. And I was able to work through that. Now, that's just one example. And that was a tangible example. But I mean, this work is not limited to just things, it's limited to feelings, it's limited to the way that you respond to whether it's people or, or even just energy.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really great example. And it's, like you said, it's not just to address tangible things, but it's, for me personally, it's helped me with the intangible, with feelings, with emotions, with, like I said in the very beginning, just getting to know myself better. And that almost like brings you to this like state of complete surrender and comfort.
Yes.
And it's peace. That's the word I'm looking for. There's so much peace
Yes.
that you have. And Lacy refers to the opposite as dog paddling. And I love that because sometimes I still find myself dog paddling. I'm like, oh, Alex, you're dog paddling.
Oh my gosh. Are you kidding me? Going into quarantine, I was dog paddling in abundance, which I really need to say that for the majority of my life, I lived in a lack mentality. And, I believed that I didn't have the means to live the life that I wanted, which was just not true. It really wasn't true, but I believed it so wholeheartedly. In doing this work, that is the first thing I was able to shift out of, was that lack mentality, to see that I picked that up in childhood and it wasn't mine. But as soon as we went into quarantine, and my husband, hasn't worked. He's in television, and unfortunately, with everything going on, TV just kind of halted.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make sure that I didn't go back into a lack mentality. So I was desperately trying to stay abundant. So what that means is I was over tipping. Like if we picked up food to go, I was so afraid that the universe would think that I might slip back into lack mentality, that I was over tipping. Or, some of my friends put their homes, like they're deferred their mortgage. And I was like, no, 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 because that sends the message that I can't afford it, and I can. But do you see that that's the wrong energetic behind that?
Yeah.
I wasn't calmly tipping. I wasn't calmly paying my mortgage. I was desperately trying to prove that I could afford it. So that's one thing I really want to talk about here, is the energetics behind things. Because you might be doing a task that's your everyday task, but if you're going into it with the wrong energetic, and maybe wrong is not the right word, I should say, desperate or anxiety ridden or high alert, then you have to really be thinking about what's the meaning behind that. So once I recognized that, I was like, oh my goodness, I'm that is lack. I was trying so hard to not do it, and it was just happening. And so, you just kind of sit back and you recognize it, you give yourself grace, and then you move on.
Yeah.
And that's what's so great about this, is that, yes, I know I mentioned the different topics and workshops, and then, these deep imaginings, this hypnotic listenings that you mentioned earlier, there's ones on prosperity and reinforcing, there's one on your authentic self, your magnetic self, and then you have the inner child and shadow ones, and you have ones around tests. I mean, there's something for everybody in this, and that's what's so great. And I dip in sometimes every day. Sometimes I just journal. Sometimes I just talk aloud. One thing I do want to say is that what's really made, and you can probably speak to this too, being obviously like doing the work, is that for my clients, I like to make sure that this is working for them, and that not to get stuck in perfectionism on how you're doing it, and that, making sure that this work, it fits into your lifestyle. And, I like to walk and listen to sometimes the deep imaginings, whether it's at the beach or I hike. If I'm on a long drive, I can listen and talk out loud. It's however you can get yourself into like a calm state, is when you can do this, versus just feeling like you just have to sit down in a quiet, dark corner and have your eyes covered. That works for some people. But I also think that sometimes, if people have kids and you can only fit it in while you're on a walk and they're in a stroller, then that's what you have to do. Like, you can't fail this work. The way to fail it is not doing it.
Yeah, I love that you said this because I'm all about honoring people's individuality and uniqueness, and everybody's
Mm-hmm.
going to want to do this in a different way. And that's one thing that you really taught me how to do. And one key takeaway from your podcast on Expanded, when I first heard you, your approach to it was walking. And I was like, oh my God, you can do this in that way, because I thought you'd have to really follow the instructions and sit down and like light all the candles in your room and sit down and go into these deep imaginings. And I know that for some people that can be difficult, and even the meditations themselves are difficult. So knowing that you have permission to just do the journal, or maybe you just, do it in your car on your drive, wherever, however you want to approach this work, you can make it your own, which I think is a big takeaway.
Definitely.
Before we finish up, I wanted to ask about the coaching sessions that you offer. How can somebody work with you? Do they have to go through some of the TBM work first, or can they work with you off the bat? How does that work?
Great question, and thank you so much for bringing that up. So, you do not need to be a Pathway member, and the Pathway means you pay a subscription to have access to all of the workshops. So you don't have to do that. It would behoove you to understand, what the workshops are about, and it would be helpful. I have some clients now who are like, I don't know where to start. Can you help guide me through the process? And I 100% can. But it would actually be helpful if you did do How to Manifest and Inner Child and possibly Shadow. So that way we can talk about some of these limiting beliefs. It's going to be a little bit harder if you aren't aware of any of it yet. But I do have some clients where they're like, I'm very overwhelmed. I don't know where to start. Help me create a plan. And I 100% make it very much prescriptive to each person. So it's an hour long session. It's over Zoom, so I get to see everyone's beautiful face, which I love. And, I take notes, and then I give summary, and then full homework. So based on what I heard, based on the needs, I will specifically give a plan on, like, in the next 4 weeks, because I typically meet with my clients once a month. This is what you should work on. It's worked for people. They really like it. And, you can go to tbmagnetic.com, and they have, under coaching, you'll see that there's a coaching section, and we've got multiple coaches, which is great. And so, obviously I would love people to connect with me, but, there's bios on each person on there. And if, one person feels like they're connected to the other person, I think that's fantastic. And, you can book a session. And again, they're an hour long, and lots of discussion happens within the hour. It goes by fast, but it's been the most exciting, rewarding, purposeful things that I've ever done. And years ago, I actually used to teach nutrition. And so this is just another version of teaching and making people just be aware. Yes, I'm called a coach, but really I'm an advocate for you, and, helping guide you through this process to find your most authentic self. Because once you find that person, that's where the magic happens.
I love that. And I can attest to how helpful the sessions are. Well, and it's tangible too. You're giving real, actionable things for somebody to do and take steps to make big changes in their, or little changes in their life. That's
Yeah.
great. One more question, out of curiosity, and I know we're probably out of time, but what do most of your clients come to you with? Is there like a common theme you're seeing?
Yes, I think that, people like to come to me because they want me to help them create their own process, right? They want to find something that they're going to stick to that feels tangible, it works for them. Career is a big one, being able to understand, where should they be going? How should they be approaching it? Talking about income and finances, like getting out of a lack mentality. And really just, finding ways to find your authentic self. So that's mostly, really I cover everything, but that's the overarching theme that people come to me for.
Okay, awesome. That's good to know. Okay, where can people find you other than the
So,
tobemagnetic.com
yeah.
under coaching?
Yes. So you can find me on Instagram. My Instagram handle is Heather underscore Marie, Marie underscore T. I recently got married and I need to change my last name from Whitaker to Turbeaton, which is my married name. So
Oh,
I purposely put that in my Instagram because I'm going to change it before my 1 year anniversary.
yay. I love it. Thank you so much for doing this. This is so helpful. I hope everyone found it as enlightening and helpful as I did. I highly recommend the TBM work. I'm such a big fan. Anyone that knows me and talks to me on a regular basis knows I'm such a big fan, and I'm such a big fan of working with you too. So I
Well,
highly
thank you
recommend
so
it.
much. I appreciate the opportunity to get on and share. And, if anyone even just has questions and they're not quite ready to book a session, but they want to understand it, I'm constantly trying to just be supportive in general about this journey. So anyone can reach out.
Awesome. Yeah, and I love the whatever you share on Instagram stories too is always a helpful reminder too. So
Thank
everyone go
you.
follow Heather. Hi everyone, I'm Alex and you are listening to the Health Accomplice podcast. I'm on a health journey and learning so much about my mind, body, and spirituality, and I want to share that with all of you in the hopes that it benefits you as well so that we can live our healthiest and happiest lives. Welcome to the podcast.